Today, we're looking at the steep rise in scams targeting immigrants across the US. What kinds of scams are these? Why are these immigrants especially vulnerable? What can people do in advance to protect themselves and their assets? Where can someone who's been scammed or fears being scammed turn for help? Is it ever possible to recover what one has lost to a scam? Our subject matter experts are Vaca and Kati Daffan, two lawyers who have long specialized in fighting consumer fraud and have spoken numerous times at our briefings while working for the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection. Both are now in private practice in Washington, D.C. Okay, so let's welcome Vaca. She's a 23-year veteran of the FTC who worked to secure hundreds of millions of dollars in refunds to consumers and injunctive relief that ended unlawful conduct, and Kati Daffan, who worked for 15 years as a litigator, manager, and leader at the FTC. As assistant director in the FTC's Division of Marketing Practices, she led litigation and initiatives related to multi-level marketing, deceptive business opportunities, AI-related fraud, illegal repair restrictions, and payment mechanisms used to facilitate scams. Welcome both. Please share with us what you're seeing and what immigrants in particular need to know to protect themselves.
Thank you so much, Pilar. Thank you to American Community Media for hosting us today. We have had the real pleasure of working with many of the media outlets that are on this call today, and just want to say hello and hello again, and thank you for helping us get the word out about scams. So Kati and I, as Pilar mentioned, starting our own new adventure in private practice. And as part of that journey, we have been doing a lot of outreach and work with community advocates and others to try to understand what are some of the consumer protection problems that immigrants in particular are experiencing right now. What we heard was really disturbing and incredibly alarming. We are hearing about lots and lots of scams targeting immigrants, families when they are put into detention, and targeting some of the most vulnerable people out there. What these scammers are doing, well, they're extracting thousands and even tens of thousands of dollars from people. So let me tell you about this and a little bit about how it works. So here's what we're seeing. When people are experiencing heightened emotional distress, we know that they are particularly susceptible to a scam, to a fraud, to someone who tells them that they can help relieve that tension, relieve that stress. Detention, so being detained and being put into a detention facility by ICE, that can happen very, very suddenly. Of course, it involves a threat to the family, to the integrity of the family. And of course, it frequently involves an inability or difficulty in getting information and in communicating with the family and with lawyers. So all of those three things heighten somebody's emotional distress. So the next thing that happens, so let me just back up just a little bit. So some of the scams that we are seeing are targeting people who've had a loved one suddenly detained. And when that person is face to face with that situation, they are frequently looking very, very quickly for some legal help, something to help their family reunite. Okay, and that's the heightened distress that I'm talking about. Why is it working? Well, it works because these scammers are using payment methods, in part because they're using payment methods that are hard to reverse and allow the scammer to stay hidden. So many of you will know this because you may have heard me talk about it in the past, but your ability to recover funds really depends on what payment method you're using. And you might need to act really, really quickly to try to get your money back. Um, but the bad guys know that. And so they're going to try to string you along. And that's something we are seeing. Some of these people will ask you for payment through various mechanisms, some of which are going to be unfamiliar to you, some of which might be familiar, but some of which are going to be very unfamiliar to you. So now I'm going to pass it along to Katie so she can tell you a little bit about how the scam plays out with some real world examples.
Yes. So you can tell from what Monica is saying that we're talking about a time in a family's life where someone has been picked up by ICE and has disappeared. And so, of course, the family is going to be absolutely beside themselves trying to get help and find that person and make sure that person is safe and see if they can get out of detention. And so this is where scammers have seen an opportunity and have jumped in to offer supposed help to these family members. Scammers can show up if you're searching for a lawyer online. Scammers can get in touch other ways. But one common strand among all the scammers is they will promise they can assure success. They will be able to get your family member out of detention and help you with your legal trouble. And this is not something that is just, easy to spot. These scammers are very sophisticated. What we've been hearing really disturbed us because of the lengths that the scammers are going to make what they're doing seem realistic. What we've heard from community partners is that they're actually designing documents and using props and many other methods to convince people that they are truly lawyers and they're truly going to help your family member. So, for example, we've heard about people presenting a bar license that looks like a real attorney bar license. And when you look up the lawyer, there really is a lawyer with that name practicing in California. Okay. We've heard about people having a fake law firm. We've heard about people even having a fake immigration hearing. We have heard about Zoom calls where it looks like there's an immigration judge that is hearing a case and ruling that someone can go out on bond. Then we have heard about fake orders to release someone on bond. Why is that? Because it convinces the family, who may have already paid money for a lawyer, now you need to pay the money for bond for your loved one to be released. And you may know that that's a lot of money. So we've heard of people paying thousands of dollars or even losing tens of thousands of dollars because they not only wanted to hire a lawyer, they wanted to pay bond after the court ordered their family member released. We have heard of even fake receipts. Okay, ICE received your bond money and here's a receipt. And so all of these documents look like they could actually be coming from the government. And of course, when someone is so desperate to help their family member, it's going to be very easy to believe that this is all legitimate. Should we take questions now, Pilar, or would you rather us wait till the end?
It's up to you. However,
I'd be happy to take Ms. Bazan's question now.
Okay, it's fine because as you talk, people may have questions. Okay. We have a question here from Cesar Nuku. He says, aren't scams supposedly monitored by intelligence of host countries and addressed, let me see, by them for avoidance? Are scamming usually done online, making it prevalent even from another part of the world? Not sure.
Yes.
Do you get the question? Okay.
I think I understand. And, the government of each country is probably doing what they can to monitor for scams and try to fight scams. But unfortunately, what we've seen from so many years at the Federal Trade Commission is that these scammers find ways through all of the defenses. It doesn't take that much money to advertise on social media. It doesn't take much money to place a phone call or send a text or an email. And so the scammers are getting through. Nobody is safe from being contacted by a scammer, even though governments are trying to stop it.
Okay, there's a question by Araceli Martinez. Araceli, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Pilar. Well, how can immigrants prepare themselves from the very beginning to avoid falling into the hands of scammers? As you mentioned, these individuals, in some cases, pose not only as lawyers, but even as immigration judges. I have written a couple of stories about them. What steps should be taken to avoid being scammed? And we also, what we are watching is that there are the actual lawyers who charge immigrants exorbitant fees, fully aware that they will not be able to do anything to resolve their cases. How can one avoid not only the scammers, but also these unscrupulous lawyers? And thank you so much.
Good question.
Those are excellent questions, Araceli, and we are going to address those in the next section. And we have also provided a resource sheet that will have some information that you can share with your audiences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just go ahead with your presentation.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Pilar, and thanks everyone. So back to what the scammers are doing. What they also do along the course of this whole interaction is they ask to be paid, but they don't ask to be paid, $20,000 at once. What we're seeing is that they will ask to be paid smaller amounts and for services that may sound reasonable. Like, I need this many $100 for a retainer fee. That sounds reasonable. And so somebody will pay them that. Then they will say they need another amount of money for a bond application. Then later, they need this many thousands of dollars for the bond itself. And then something else may come up, like taxes that need to be paid. And during the whole course of this fraud, there may be multiple people who are speaking with the victim and talking about, their role to what's going on. And so these are very elaborate scams. They may have different actors playing different parts. And they also may ask to be paid in different ways. So maybe sometimes they ask for a payment by money order, by Zelle, by wire transfer, by going to your bank and getting a transfer, by Cash App. I mean, really, you name it. And the scammers may ask that you make a payment in that way, and then they may switch to another way. And of course, that makes it harder for people to detect that a fraud is going on. So I'll talk about some red flags for what people can look out for. And then I'll pass it to Monica to talk about Araceli's question about what people can do to prepare in advance. So one of the red flags for this type of scam is that the first contact you get is on social media, or if you are responding to an online advertisement. We've been hearing about that a lot, and we think that there are probably organized groups of criminals who are advertising on social media and specifically targeting immigrant communities to get phone calls about needing help with immigration services. Another big red flag is if someone assures that you are likely to be successful. In a case that we've heard of, they asked, okay, give me your wife's information and give me her passport number and let me look up what's going on. And then they came back to the family and said, oh, good news, I can help with this. I can get her out on bail. Well, that is also a sign of a scam, because in this moment, no one can guarantee success, unfortunately, or good outcomes with these immigration proceedings. Another red flag is one I already mentioned, that there may be various payment methods and particular payment methods like money orders, transfers, Zelle, Cash App, cryptocurrency, cash. These are the types of payment methods that scammers choose because it's harder to reverse the payment and it's harder to track them down using those particular payment methods. Another one is gift cards. And then finally, another sign of a scam is if you're being asked to pay various different people or entities along the way. That is something we've seen quite frequently. They'll say, oh, you paid the lawyer, now you need to pay the court for a bond, and oh, now you need to pay this authority for taxes. That is a trend that we've seen in these types of scams. So with that, let me turn it over to Monica to talk about how planning ahead may be able to help people with these scams.
Yeah, so thank you, Katie. That was very helpful. So a lot of what I'm going to say and a lot of the ways that people can protect themselves is by trying to prepare in advance, because they know that if they're ever in that situation, they know they're going to be in some emotional distress. When people get picked up, it's a black box. We don't know, you may not know where they're going. You may not know where they're going to end up. You know that they are moving people at different times. We've learned that holding facilities are not considered ICE detention. And so you may not be able to learn anything at all about someone when they are in that holding facility. So that is going to add to the emotional distress, the distress that's going to make it harder for you to think clearly during an emergency situation. Okay. So what can you do? What can you do in advance? Okay, so first, let's talk about protecting just your family's assets. Okay, so bank accounts. When somebody is detained, especially if it's the breadwinner of a family, then you need to make sure that the family, whoever is left over, who's left outside of detention, has access to those funds. That's very important. We've heard about people with their family members getting locked out of their bank accounts because they are not on those bank accounts. So consider adding another adult member of the family to your bank accounts so that the funds are available to the family if the account holder is detained. That's very important. If that is not something that folks are prepared to do, another thing they can do is they can consider executing a limited power of attorney. A limited power of attorney is basically a legal document in your state. So it's a state document. It's not a federal level document. It's a state document that basically gives permission for somebody else to get access to whatever you designate in that form that they can get access to. It could be, well, if I were to be detained, the person who will get access to this bank account will be my husband or my adult daughter. It could be anyone that you designate if a certain condition happens. So if somebody is detained, if somebody is deported. So that is one thing that you can do. A lot of legal services offices, also the offices in your state that offer free and low-cost legal services, are providing that kind of information to people. Here in Virginia, I know that the legal services offices have developed power of attorney forms for people to use in just this circumstance. It's incredibly important to protect the family if somebody should be detained. So look at those. And you do want to look in your state specifically, because again, this is not a federal document. So there's not a single document that can be used across the country, but within your state, there will be some resources for you to use. And I've forwarded to Pilar some resources so that you can take a look and look for in your state a limited power of attorney sample that you can use. So please consult the legal services offices in your state. The second thing, so we've got the bank account. The other really big picture thing is a car. We have heard about immigrants who are picked up and detained by ICE at a traffic stop. And sometimes what happens is that that car will then be towed into an impound lot. And while that car is sitting in that lot, that car is going to continue to accrue fees. It's going to be they're going to be charged every day that that car is sitting in that lot. Well, when the family member comes to try to pick up that car, sometimes those lots are requiring people to present proof that they are on the insurance documents. And they will not let people take the car out if they're not on the insurance, on the auto insurance document or on the title of the car. So consider adding your loved one to your auto insurance or your title. And again, go back to that limited power of attorney form that will enable the family to sell that car if it's needed. So again, those are very important forms. And I'm just going to say it one more time. It's the limited power of attorney. Okay, so now you have acted to try to preserve some financial resources for your family. The next thing you can do and should do is now, before anything happens to you or to your loved one, look for a reputable immigration lawyer to consult with about your circumstances. Even if you don't want to request the services now, it will be so much easier to call from a list that you have, because you will know that the people on that list are reputable sources. Okay, how do you find such lists? There are various resources. I will give you 3, but again, we've put this in the resource page that we forwarded to Pilar. But one of them is the American Immigration Lawyers Association. The American Immigration Lawyers Association is a reputable organization. It has many members who pay fees to be part of a reputable organization. And they have a directory that will help you find reliable immigration lawyers. The next resource is the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. It is called Clinic. The Catholic Legal Immigration Network, again, this is on that resource page. It will provide you with a list of potential resources, such as the Catholic Charities offices in your state or in your local area. And then there is another resource that we have linked you to, which is an immigration legal advocates page, which again is listing real resources. You need to be careful here, because if you are looking through one of those lists, you are going to be in a much better state than if you are trying to find something on Facebook. And I can't tell you, we've heard this again and again of people feeling absolute desperation because their husband or their wife or their son or somebody was picked up and detained. And in that moment, they are looking on Facebook or on some social media site for immigration services. And that is a source of fraud. And, you know, it's not just immigration fraud. A lot of the costliest scams are starting on social media these days. So I really want to get that word out. Be very, very careful on social media. Look to reputable sources when you're looking for services, especially services that are very costly and services where we are seeing scams. And this is one of them. So again, start with a list of reputable sources and assemble that list today. Assemble that list as soon as you possibly can. And then finally, you know, talk with your family about what to do if that member of your family is detained. if you have a plan, then when you lose communication with your loved one, for even if it's just a temporary loss of communication, you can rely back on that plan. You know what your husband or your wife is going to do, you know what you want them to do, and you already have a plan of what to do next. So again, all of this is designed to try to help you avoid having that your stress is going to be heightened if something like this were to happen. Try to avoid making big decisions in that moment of stress. Okay, Katie.
Yeah, so now I'm going to take over and finish up our presentation by talking about what to do to avoid scams and then where to turn if you do get scammed, so that you all can share that with your readers. So we've already said a little bit about how to avoid encountering these fraudsters. One thing is, do not use social media to find a lawyer, and be very careful using the internet to find a lawyer. I wanted to note that these days we're seeing so many scams that are paid advertisements on these search platforms. So if you do an internet search, some of the first things that come back will actually be ads. And the FTC has taken action against an immigration services scammer who was advertising there, and say, kind of looked like it was a government agency. And so people were going there to get information from the government agency. And really, it was a company that was using deceptive practices. So if you're on social media or on the internet looking for a lawyer, don't use social media. And if you're on the internet, be very careful that you're finding the right search results and not going to a paid advertisement. Also, very important to avoid working with someone who holds themselves out as a notario. Many of you already know that the word notario has a different meaning in various parts of Latin America, where it can indicate a special status and a person that could help you with a legal issue. But in the United States, it is a totally different thing, and it's very easy to become a notary public. So over the years, we've seen many scammers advertise themselves as a notario público, and then they aren't actually a lawyer, and they can't actually help you with immigration issues. So that is one thing to watch out for. We see a similar problem with people advertising that they can provide tax help, and they may kind of imply that they're a lawyer and can help you with any kind of legal issue. But that's another red flag and something to avoid when you're searching for legal help. So those are things not to do. What can you tell your readers that they actually should do if they're in this very difficult situation and have been are either facing scams or have been scammed? First, contact reputable community-based organizations to get referrals to real immigration lawyers. And this is where the lists that we're going to share after the briefing may be helpful. Number 2, advise your readers to file reports about the fraud. If they have been scammed, time may be of the essence to get their money back. Sometimes it's incredibly important that you quickly report what happened to you. And the first report that you should make should be to the person who helped facilitate the payment. So if you did a bank transfer, call your bank right away. If you use Western Union or MoneyGram to send a wire, call Western Union, call MoneyGram. If you used a payment app, contact the payment app and let them know this was a fraud. I would like the payment to be reversed, and work with them to see if that can happen. Depending on how fast it is, sometimes it's doable, sometimes it's not, but that should be the very first call. And then after that, if you're willing to also file a report with the authorities, that is a very helpful thing to do for the rest of the community. Now, people can file reports with their state attorney general if they're comfortable, or with the Federal Trade Commission. But if people are not comfortable filing reports directly with a government agency, then there's another way to do it that's still very helpful. You can get an advocate or someone you trust to file a report on your behalf. And then they will put their contact information in there. And let's say law enforcement wants to bring a case against that scammer. They will have someone to call to get more information about what happened. But they won't have the personal information of the victim if the victim doesn't feel comfortable sharing that with the government agency. So work through your advocate or an organization you trust to file reports on your behalf. And then finally, the last point we want to make before opening it up to questions is to advise people who have experienced fraud, or really all of us, to talk with other people in our community about scams. We know from research that people who've heard about a scam and know that it's out there, it's something that happens, they are much, much, much less likely to actually lose money to that scam. So we can all do a public service by talking with our friends and neighbors about these scams, and also, of course, by writing about them, as many of you are considering. So that's why we really appreciate the opportunity to be here, because this is a huge problem, and we're so grateful to all of you for considering to help getting the word out to people.
Okay, so let's go through some questions. I believe some of the questions have been answered, but a couple of people raised this issue. I don't know, Sunita, do you wanna ask your question about the FTC?
I was going to ask about political will. Does the FTC have the political will currently to go after these types of scams?
So neither one of us are at the FTC
No,
anymore.
I realize that. I think
Yeah.
I'm asking more of a...
Yeah. No, I mean,
Expert
look,
take.
at this moment, the FTC does not consider itself to be an independent agency. So it is an arm of the Trump administration, and the Trump administration has made a very big point of launching an immigration crackdown. So I would not anticipate that the FTC will be taking action against immigration scams.
So you don't recommend immigrants to go to the FTC to report
Well,
scams?
so when people, what I can say is that when you report to the FTC, you don't just report to the FTC, you also report to all of the law enforcers across the country who access the FTC's database. And that can include state attorneys general and other local law enforcers who are interested. But, candidly, this is a law enforcement database that's available to any law enforcement agency. So I totally understand if people feel uncomfortable with that, and I would not suggest that people put their information into a government database if they do not feel comfortable with that at all. And again, what Katie said is right. You can work with an organization to file on your behalf. And that's one way to go. And that's a way to to get the information out there, but not risk exposing yourself any further.
Okay, great. Jorge Luis, do you want to ask your question? Jorge Luis Macias?
Hi, good morning. Jorge Luis Macias. The question that I have is because I read a story that a professor at Newhouse and Syracuse University a few days ago, he said that the government, the US government, the Trump administration collected more than $1 billion in immigration fees. But after that, they refused to process the applications of these immigrants silence, denials, no answers. What are your opinion about that? My question is this not the biggest fraud in immigration that we can see right now?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that specific case, but that does sound deeply problematic.
All right. It does. Henrietta Burrows?
Thanks, Pilar. Given the resources that scammers have to defraud victims, is there a way that families can detect the legitimate advice from those who would give illegitimate assistance? And also, are there any rules and regulations at all that would that would require social media hosts to test for false advertising as much as they want the advertising? Are there any rules that prevent them from accepting false advertising?
So these are good questions and not easy questions. As you mentioned, the scammers have so many resources, and these days, very high-tech operations are not as expensive to set up as they used to be. So we see the scammers having access to technologies like artificial intelligence to do voice cloning or to do deep fake videos and to use all of these in their scams. And so, what can a family do, as you asked, to protect themselves from this type of fraud? One thing that we recommend is working closely with organizations that you trust. So, if you have an existing relationship with a legal services organization, a community organization, a social services or local government organization, these are the kind of trusted partners that are so important in helping protect people from fraud. Another thing that you can consider doing is signing up for just blog posts and warnings from the Federal Trade Commission. If you're worried about scams in general, they will send out, scam alerts about what they're seeing and what's the latest. So those are some things you can do. In terms of the responsibility of the social media and the other companies to prevent advertising by scammers on their platforms, I will just say that that is a very hot topic right now and a huge subject of debate. Some of you may have seen an article that came out talking about how much money Meta is, allegedly gets from ads posted by fraudsters. And so this is a topic that is a huge source of debate right now. Do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I think the platforms could do more here to crack down on that stuff. But yeah, it's a hot topic of debate and a lot of legal complications there.
Okay, going through the questions and trying to find the ones that have not been addressed. There's a question by Dana Vargas. She asks, how many immigrants dealing with ICE detention are being scammed, and how does this number compare to previous years if data exists? Do you have any
So
idea?
hard to get data on this topic because people would need to be reporting about it. What I know is that the American Immigration Lawyers Association has put out a fact sheet about it because they are very concerned. They are seeing it with their members. And their members are immigration lawyers, so they are as tapped into the communities that are being affected as anybody else. And if they are seeing it, then that's something that we have to address.
Another thing I'll just note is that Monica and I were very disturbed and upset to hear about these scams when we started to talk to people, but we were not surprised because over our many years at the Federal Trade Commission, we have always seen the scammers following the headlines every single time when there is something stressful going on, something newsworthy. The scammers try to figure out how can they take advantage of that situation. So unfortunately, it is just completely predictable that with a spike in ICE detention, there will be a spike in scams targeting the victim families.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just looking at this question by Irene Diaz-Bazan, and this relates to what you just said. With scams targeting immigrant communities and rising sharply, are we facing just a criminal issue, a deeper failure in protection, education, and access to justice? I would say yes, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is a criminal issue. The people who are stealing this money are actually criminals. They are hardcore criminals. What they are doing is preying on people's distress, preying on people who absolutely need to get some relief for their family members, using all kinds of impersonation techniques in order to in order to commit the fraud. I mean, this is wire fraud.
Okay. But of course, they're more vulnerable. The more the government targets certain groups of people, the more they become vulnerable to this. So
Yes.
basically, they are making this population a easy target for whatever happens or whatever, whoever wants to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, I
guess
think
that's,
that's right.
yeah. Okay, a question here by Jessica. Do families need to provide some type of documentation that their loved one has been detained to the bank? How
Oh,
do they acquire that proof?
oh, that's interesting. Okay, so if you look at some of these, and this is something that I think this is the question about the limited power of attorney. Um, uh, one of the links that I sent over in the resource page actually addresses that, Jessica. It's the link is to a limited power of attorney in Virginia, which specifically says that the family member can present to the bank that this has happened, can tell them that this has happened so that the bank can accept that. The bank can then ask for some information to verify that. But the bank is supposed to take the word for it from the family member. Again, that's a matter of state law, so you're going to want to look at your state legal services to see how best to frame that up.
Yeah, this is interesting. There's a question here by Bernadette Ferrer. Have these organized scammers been traced or tracked to a specific location?
I mean, I'm not aware of any law enforcement work around these new immigration scams that we're seeing. I'm not
Okay.
aware of any. That doesn't mean it's not happening, but I would be shocked if any federal resources are being spent on this.
One thing that I will note that we've heard, just in case it's of interest to you, is that some of these scammers speak perfect Spanish. And so that's one thing to note when you're talking with someone, just the fact that they speak Spanish or that they may be originally from, the same country that you are, should not provide any comfort, because we are seeing them in language committing these scams.
Okay. One by Ling Wang. There have been growing reports of real estate scams targeting immigrant families, such as fraudulent down payment assistance programs or scammers posing as agents. What warning signs should we watch for, and what steps should we take?
So that is, I think that the main thing you want to know is that you always want to work with a registered professional, somebody who actually has the certification and the licensure that the state provides, to the extent the state does provide that. And when you're looking for somebody that you want to work with, be sure not to just take their word for it, right? every professional organization has some kind of a way to look up the members. I'm a member of the bar. Somebody can look up my license in Illinois anytime. So look it up and make sure that that's the same person.
And just with real estate scams in general, we do see those getting increasingly sophisticated. It starts sometimes with an apartment or a home that looks like a really good deal, and everything's there. All the pictures are there. Everything looks like another real estate offering, but it can be all fake. And so one thing that we really recommend to people is make sure that you have verified every single way you know how that this is a real listing and that you are the one who will be getting the property before you turn over any money. Because we've also heard of people taking rent from multiple different folks. So you want to, if you can, meet face to face, confirm someone's employer, confirm that they're really the ones renting out the building, have the lease, etc., before turning over any money.
Okay, Sandy asks, you have seen scams targeting immigrants for years. What's the biggest change since the launch of the mass deportation campaign? What's new?
That's such a great question. Yeah, great question. So, I can give you sort of anecdotal, but I think this is probably true to a very, very large extent. I spoke with a friend who is an immigration lawyer, and what he told me was that when he was providing legal services, legal immigration services, it was pretty standard that if you had somebody who had applied for asylum or who had applied to change their status, and they had some kind of a hearing in court, and they got picked up, by ICE, that 90% of the time he was able to get them out on bond. It was just very normal and very routine 90% of the time to be able to get people out on bond. But now we're seeing that people, especially when they are sent to certain facilities, are really not able to get out on bond. There's no bond that is available for them, even if they have a pending application to adjust their status, like an asylum petition, for instance. And that is a huge difference. Because what that means is that, when you hear people make guarantees and assurances that, oh, for sure, we're going to be able to get your loved one out of detention. We will certainly be able to get them a bond, 100% chance that we will. Those are the kinds of representations that are just false. There is no way, even in the old days of saying, 100% chance that I can get your relative out on bond. So those are huge red flags. And I would say that is one of the biggest differences that I've become aware of, is just that there are so many people that are being picked up and detained right now, and so few people who are ever able to get that bond.
And just picking up on that, one thing I'll add is that creates an opportunity for scammers, because bond is a lot of money for each person. And so the scammers, if they think they have a chance of getting those thousands of dollars from a panicking family, what we are seeing now is that they're willing to put a lot of effort into making a very sophisticated fraud. And so immigration lawyers we've spoken with have said, this is wild. We're seeing fake documents, fake orders, fake hearings, fake receipts, and all of that seems quite new to them, or at least the sophistication and the extent of it is quite surprising. But I think it's because there's money to be made and they're willing to invest in these sophisticated tactics.
Yeah. Nestor Fantini, you want to ask your question? Is Nestor there? Okay. All right, maybe he stepped down. Okay, he's
No,
put in the chat.
I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
I'm sorry.
Go
I was
ahead.
having problems with that mute and mute.
That's usual.
So
The
thank
mute.
you. Thank you, Pilar. My question, we usually think of scammers as individuals, and I know that we're focusing mainly in terms of the immigrant community, but in general, immigrants, do corporations deceive customers when pitching some of their aggressive sales? And could this be considered a white-collar crime?
Well, there are lots of corporations that the government has sued for making misrepresentations or misleading statements, and you only need to look. You only need to look at the list of cases that the FTC and the CFPB have brought over the last 10 years to see there are some of the biggest corporations on those lists. So generally, misleading and deceptive advertising is not considered white collar crime. It depends how deep the violation is, if it could be considered an actual fraud. So ordinarily, it would not be considered that. But deceptive advertising is certainly a civil law violation.
Okay, question from Elena Kuznetsova. Elena, ask your question, please.
Thank you, Pilar. The last one, because I had three.
Yes, anyone you want.
Okay. So, what are the types of scams targeting immigrant communities have emerged recently, besides the one immigration service scams? Thank you.
The immigration services scams one is the one that we are the most concerned with right now, because this is the one that people are losing their life savings over. Thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on that. Other types of scams that we have seen hitting immigrant communities can be, so many different kinds of scams. It runs the gamut. We see imposter scams targeting immigrant communities. So where somebody claims to be the IRS, or somebody claims to be another government agency to try to get money out of them. We've seen, such as USCIS, there are a number of scams that have targeted immigrants. Some of them could be mortgage foreclosure scams. These are scams that sometimes are perpetrated in the same language as the immigrant community. And so there's a little bit of trust, a little bit more trust because of that. But they are very similar to the other scams that we're seeing hit other communities.
And what I would just add is we see a lot of income scams targeting immigrant communities. So many different versions of fraud that say you can make money if you join me, and it could be a business opportunity to sell things. It could be multi-level marketing. It could be you can make money online or by trading. And we do see those types of frauds, kind of spreading through immigrant communities far too often.
Okay, Pamela and Shang, ask your question, please.
Excellent point.
Yes, I'm here. I was trying to unmute myself. Well, thank you so much for this very important briefing. My question is centered around, well, of course, the fear, but for those who really have already been scammed and are ashamed to come forward after being scammed. I'm just curious to know if there are any culturally sensitive pathways for the various immigrant groups. Because most times when we have these briefings, we focus a lot on the Latino, for example, talk about notarios, but I'm wondering if we've taken the time, or should we also take the time to investigate the other cultures and what these stand for? Because, for example, African immigrants, as you know, or Black immigrants in general, there's data that shows that they are the first to get deported it because they don't really have that much advocacy. And of course, the Asians and the Middle Easterners, there's so many different groups. I know we can't cover them all, but are there any effort being made to have culturally sensitive pathways for these groups, especially for those who already have been scammed, don't have any resources, don't know where to go, or and are even embarrassed to say they've been scammed?
It's such an excellent question and such an important question. And, you know, when Monica and I worked at the FTC, a huge focus of ours was ensuring that we as an agency had relationships with trusted community members in every community in the country, because we know that it doesn't work just to try to communicate directly to the population and reach everyone. You do need those culturally sensitive. Either you need to have the understanding yourself, or you need to have a close relationship with someone who does and can help you get the word out from a trusted source. Right now, I really think that things are far too ad hoc, and people are probably relying on their social networks and their very, very local community organizations. I will say that in the materials we sent over to distribute, there is a link to the New York City website that has some information that is in a number of different languages. And Ayla has in some languages too.
Yes.
But that's just a language issue. And I know your question is much broader than that, Pamela. Sorry, I don't have a great answer.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Katie said. And you are so right, Pamela. This is so important for all of us to understand. With respect to reporting and that sense of shame, you're 100% right. Yeah. And one reason that the FTC's complaint site does in fact allow organizations to file complaints on behalf of individuals is because sometimes that just makes people feel a little bit more comfortable, at least getting the word out that something bad has happened to them, so that the people in the local governments can potentially respond.
Okay, and Sunita wanted to know something. Sunita? Hello? Sunita, are you there?
Sorry.
Okay,
got it. Katie, you had mentioned earlier that you can find fraud attorneys on the state bar association. How is that possible? Earlier,
what I was saying, I know what I was saying is that, so one of the scams we heard about, the scammer said, my name is Jane Smith, and here's my bar card. And then when the victim looked at the bar card, they could actually go and confirm that Jane Smith is a lawyer in California. And this looks like an actual bar card from the state of California. So obviously the caller was not Jane Smith, but they had gone to the length of impersonating a particular person. And who knows if they found a lost bar card or if they created a bar card, a fake bar card, but they had, anticipated that someone might check. And so they impersonated a real lawyer. Yeah. Horrible.
Okay.
So let me just add one thing to that, which that's exactly right. And so that's one reason why, if people do find that a bar card, like somebody sends them a bar card over text, actually check that person's law firm and call the law firm that's registered on the state bar association, not whatever phone number, phony baloney phone number they give you, right. But check that law firm and call them.